Welcome to the Talk Spot. This is Marcus, and today I'm joined by Larry Nimmer. Larry created a documentary called Michael Jackson, A Case for Innocence. Larry, thank you for coming on.
Right.
And yeah, let's talk a little bit. So maybe before we get into the documentary that you made, maybe if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about yourself and your work and your experience, I guess, or let's say, how you were involved with Michael Jackson altogether.
Okay, well, I've been a filmmaker since the 70s, and one of my specialties, in addition to short documentaries and so forth, is doing videos for attorneys for use in the courtroom. And when Michael was being prosecuted in 2005, his attorney, Robert Sanger, hired me, and then Tom Messerow as well, to do some video of Neverland Ranch, and I did that. Should I explain the circumstances more?
Yes, please.
Yeah, well, let's see. Michael's lawyers wanted the jury to be able to go out to Neverland and see for themselves it wasn't like a prison, or it wasn't a place just to entrap people, but it was a good, positive place. But the judge wasn't going to allow the jurors to go there, but the judge would allow a video tour of Neverland for them to see it. And so they were seeing the sheriff's footage, the sheriff's raid footage, but that didn't look so friendly. So I was hired to make a video tour of Neverland. And for a month, I went there off and on, number of visits, and documented wherever I wanted to, just to kind of show what the average visitor would see and experience at Neverland. And basically I could go anywhere. And so I documented inside the house, in the kitchen, in his bedroom, the living room, the zoo, the arcade area, the amusement park, the video library, the grounds, and that's kind of what I did.
So you as so for a lot of people, I think that their ideas of Neverland Ranch, obviously there's a lot of talk about it in the media about how, if you listen to the Arzizos, how do you say the last name? Gavin Arvizo?
Arvizo.
Okay.
Arvizo.
If you listen to some of their reports, they would say things like, we contemplated escaping by a hot air balloon, for example. Maybe if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the ranch itself, what would you compare it to? And what was it like? Are we talking just another run-of-the-mill multi-million-dollar mansion, or was this, what was it actually like inside there? Maybe not necessarily giving away any, secrets of the place, so to speak, but maybe go a little bit deeper, about what the place was actually like, and is the only way to get in and out of there by hot air balloon or not?
Well, no, there are no secure fences, just a split rail fence, so anybody or any animal can easily go in and out. There is a guard booth at the main entrance, but if you just went up the road a ways, you could just walk onto the property. It was kind of like a cross between a Beverly Hills mansion and Disneyland. Much of Neverland was built by the guy who built it before him, a real estate developer, and he built the main house and some of the cottages, and he landscaped the grounds. Michael kept that as is, but then added an amusement park, a zoo, an arcade building, and a movie theater, and some other things. In terms of the environment, there's music coming out of speakers throughout the grounds, kind of like you see here at Disneyland. So that was kind of fun, in a way a little eerie, having music coming out of the speakers. I wondered how Michael's kids related to that. Maybe it wasn't coming out of speakers near where his kids were. It was kind of nice, too, in a way. And people get around on the property through golf carts, and I was driven around on a golf cart. I could also walk around some. There's also a certain amount of shrubbery on the grounds that is made into animal shapes, and that was probably new with Michael, and that was fun to see. But the staff was very friendly, mainly Hispanic, and just kind of willing to do whatever I wanted to do. I also went there with the new owner, Tom Barrick. After Michael died, I went with a super fan, Sebastian Broussard, who was given a special tour of Neverland, and that's a separate thing. That's not in my documentary. Actually, I'm going to put that on my video on demand site. But once I shot the footage of Neverland, then later on I made a documentary about it, initially called The Untold Story of Neverland. And I had some issues with the Jackson estate about that. They didn't want me to have it broadcast. But then they were okay with having me broadcast it when Leaving Neverland came out. So I revised the documentary and added more information about the new accusers that have been shown in Leaving Neverland on HBO and at Sundance. So that's a little bit about the documentary and about Neverland. Happy to answer more questions.
Of course. I definitely want to get into the new accusers, but one more question that I have about the ranch itself, and this might sound like a bizarre question a little bit, but I've always kind of wondered with Neverland Ranch. I mean, I obviously watched your whole documentary on YouTube that you put out, and I've obviously seen other, news broadcastings of it, and you see all these staff members. Were these people full time? I mean, was this like their only job that they did? And, if so, what would happen if, Michael Jackson was, let's say he was out of town, let's say 2001, Michael Jackson was out of town for a month, let's say. I mean, what would these people do for that whole month? I mean, would they still be operating the concession stands at his movie theater when no one was going to it? I don't know. That to me, that's always seemed so strange to me, that part.
Yeah, well, that's a legit question. He did have a full-time staff, and I don't really know the numbers, probably somewhere from 5 to 20 people. I frankly don't know what was full-time. I know when the movie theater is open, some of the people that worked in the house, cleaning crew and maintenance crew, they would sometimes operate the movie theater and maybe the amusement park for that matter. So they would kind of change positions as was needed. So there wasn't I don't think a full-time crew just in the amusement park. When I went there, they turned on a number of the rides, and somebody that knew how to operate the rides did that.
So let's jump forward a little bit. So you're involved with the legal case. So you film Neverland Ranch in order for the jurors to see this in the 2004-2005 trial, and you bring this point up that Wade Robson is basically he's there defending Michael Jackson in court on the stand under penalty of perjury, right? He's going up there defending Michael, saying that nothing ever happened with Michael Jackson and himself. So then you fast forward, right. What would that be? 8 years later, I think 2013, Wade Robson comes out, claims Michael Jackson sexually assaulted him. And I remember when that happened in the news. Now, granted, I'm not a Michael Jackson super fan. I don't think that I'm somewhere on the fence a little bit. I think that there's a possibility that he did commit the crimes that they're saying, but I'm not 100% sold. That's why I wanted to bring you on. I mean, no one is totally impartial in this world, so I'm not saying I completely have I have no thoughts at all, but there are a lot of questions that I have. So Wade Robson, he comes out 2013, does an interview with Matt Lauer. Yeah, says Michael sexually assaulted him. And I don't really remember that getting a lot of traction in the news at the time. I might be wrong, but I don't remember that being a big thing in 2013. Now, obviously, in 2019, the whole Michael Jackson thing is exploding again with there's his accusation, Robson, and then there's also Safe Chuck. So, yeah, what are your thoughts about each of those people? What were your thoughts about the documentary in general? And yeah, we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, well, I thought the documentary Leaving Neverland was well produced, well shot and edited, and I think Safe Chuck and Robson came over convincingly. I assume they're good actors. I can't know anything for sure 100%, but from the facts I have that they were actors, and there have been other people acting saying Michael took advantage of them when he hadn't. But anyway, so I think it was well done. As I show in my documentary, Robson only said Michael molested him after he didn't get a job that he wanted with the Jackson estate and hoped to get fame and fortune and so forth. And then he shopped a book around, and no publishers thought it was credible enough, and also sued the estate, and that didn't go anywhere. So he seems to me to be an opportunist and safe chuck as well. That's my impression.
So, I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but are both of these people, Safechuck and Robson, are they actively suing Michael Jackson's estate right now? And if they are, do we know that figure exactly?
Well, yeah, my understanding is they do have lawsuits pending. I think there's no figure created yet, but in a lawsuit like that, you have to prove damages. You don't necessarily say up front what your expenses are. And I guess they want to prove emotional damages, which is rather subjective. But so, yeah, they do have a pending lawsuit. You know, it was reported $1.5 billion they hope to get. And then I heard other reports. But, you know, my understanding is they just want to get as much money as they can, and they quite possibly could get millions. After all, the guy that Michael settled with in '93 reportedly got 15 to 20 million. So people have come out of the woodwork trying to get money out of Michael.
Well, that's another question too, is that have there been other people recently that have started to kind of rear their heads a little bit? Are there other, you know, besides Robson and Safechuck, are there other people that are, have you heard anything about that?
No.
So these are the only two.
No, I have. Correct.
Okay. And Michael Jackson's estate, is that something owned, from your knowledge? I mean, is that something owned by his entire living family, or is that owned exclusively by his 3 kids? I mean, what is that structure a little bit? Because I think that some people might have this impression, and someone have this impression somewhat too, is that, okay, let's say Safechuck and Robson, if they sue the Jackson family, the money's either going to go to them or it's going to stay in Tito's pocket. That's kind of my thought. So even if Michael Jackson, either regard, I kind of necessarily don't care where the money is, because I feel like, you know, these are family members that are, in my opinion, seem like they've kind of leached off him, or these people that are making up these accusations, if they're lying, that are basically trying to take advantage of him. Is that the case, or to your knowledge, is that actually owned by his children?
My understanding is the estate is kind of a separate entity created to safeguard the money for Michael's 3 kids. I think it's just Michael's 3 kids that benefit, but then I think Michael's mother, Catherine, benefits in some way as well, and with like an income while she's living, something like that. But otherwise, it's not Tito or any of the brothers that benefit from the Jackson estate. It's just the 3 kids. And you know, I don't know whether Paris is 21 yet. She may be. Prince, I think, is 21, but Blanket's not 21 yet.
Okay. So while you were filming, while you were filming for the defense, because you did that 2004, 2005, right? Was it right around that time period?
Yeah, 2005.
And you mentioned in your own documentary that you were kind of going into it when you were filming for them. You kind of went into there having an open mind somewhat. After you recorded in 2004, 2005, I mean, what kind of impression did you get of Michael Jackson after that? I mean, did you get a feeling that he was actually innocent and being falsely accused? I mean, what kind of thoughts kind of ran through your mind after spending time with Michael Jackson's defense? And I mean, I'm sure you must have met Michael Jackson, or at least saw him closely.
Yeah, I saw him closely. I didn't talk much with him. Well, my impression after that experience was Michael is such a unique guy. One, he's a tremendous talent, which is obvious to everybody, but he's also was quite the humanitarian, opening up his home to sick kids and kind of creating Neverland. I think he's odd, but I don't think odd in a bad way. I think it's odd that it's unusual, I should say, that to have kids, sleeping in your bedroom, to have slumber parties, to hang around with kids a lot. That's unusual, but not necessarily immoral. And I think Michael was an unusual case because he grew up kind of in a bubble. He said he didn't have a childhood. He believed in the childlike nature. He felt more comfortable around kids than grown-ups. And he kind of purposely did that, partly for creative purposes, so that he'd use that childlike nature for his dancing, for his music, and just kind of for socializing. So I think he was unusual. He did, his plastic surgery and all was unusual, but it's not illegal or immoral necessarily. So I think he didn't realize how the world saw him because he kind of lived in a cocoon. And had he realized how he was coming across, he might have had his behavior might have been different.
Hmm. So obviously, the documentary that you made, you call it a case for innocence. Why?
Right.
I guess what are some of your major crux of the argument of why Michael is innocent? Like what? I mean, would you just say that a lot of the accusations are just people? I mean, it's just is it circumstantial?
Okay.
I mean, yeah. What would you say are the main crux of why you believe he's innocent?
Okay. Well, I believe he was innocent in '93 with the settlement because I believe he didn't do anything wrong, and he was advised to settle because he'd make more on the tour that way. He'd lose money and have to discontinue his tour. So maybe he got bad advice. He thought it would go away, but it didn't go away. In 2005, he was innocent. The jury unanimously found him innocent, and the facts, I believe, led to that proper decision. I believe he's innocent with Safechuck and Robson. Some of why we discussed it, and they don't have total credibility. I think he acts like in an innocent. He purpose. The other use of the word innocent is innocence, and as I said, I think he acts that way on purpose and doesn't see anything wrong with it, acting childlike. And that got him in trouble, maybe, but it was Michael.
Hmm. And I mean, obviously, it's been documented. Some of the tactics that I think it was the Santa Barbara sheriffs. I don't know if it was the sheriffs or the police. Some of their tactics and some of the things that they did, it definitely seems really, odd and not necessarily straightforward. Like, for example, when they said, I forgot exactly the wording, and you mentioned this, that when Michael Jackson had basically like a porno type magazine, like a Hustler or Playboy, something like that, but it was, it had naked women in it. And they said, oh, he had like lewd content or something weird. Like they kind of blew it out of proportion. And then there was something where he had a book that was like a coffee table book. And it had, I forgot, like it was just like statues of like kids like that you would see around. And I guess the kids were like naked, and they said that Michael Jackson had pedophilic content. There was weird things like that happened too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, if he was interested in that, the FBI went through all his computers. He had thousands and thousands of books. They didn't find any of that, so it leads one to believe. And the only sexy magazines they found were of women, so it leads one to believe that Michael wasn't guilty of that.
I mean, I guess a number of people have kind of brought up the idea of why now? Why are these accusations coming now? Do you kind of have an idea for that, or is it just a simple fact of, well, if it wasn't now, like who cares if it was 3 years ago or if it's 3 years from now or it's now? I mean, does that really actually make that big of a difference, the timing that these accusations are coming?
Yeah, well, I would say not, although probably it makes sense they'd come after Michael's gone and dead so that he can't defend himself and it can't be litigated in court and have Michael stand up there and say it didn't happen. But I think it was the luck of Robson and Safechuck of having the filmmaker of Leaving Neverland contact them and make such an excellent film cinematically that made them believable. And so I think it's kind of the convergence of those situations.
So for both Safechuck and Robson, did either one of them really know Michael that well? Because, again, maybe this is my own ignorance, but I get the impression for Safechuck that he didn't really know Michael that well, but he seems, between the two of them, I don't know. Granted, if this actually happened to both of them, I don't want to say anything that would degrade them, but Safechuck's story, when you're watching him, it feels really emotional. And when you watch him, it's like, wow, like this, it seems more of a powerful testimony. Where Robson, it seems like in the documentary, it seemed like he knew Michael better, but he just seems a little fishier in his interviews. I don't know if that's quantifiable or not, but just from my own observations, did either one of them actually know Michael like that well? And I mean, how well did they actually know him?
Well, my understanding is they both knew him well, that they both spent a fair amount of time with him. That's my understanding. And that was true with quite a few kids, maybe hundreds or maybe even thousands of kids.
So, so for Robson, it wasn't an actual like he wasn't necessarily like a favorite kid of Michael. Then was it like a favorite friend even?
Well, frankly, I don't know. Possibly for a few weeks he was, or not. Maybe there were, many kids he hung out with that period, but I think he's just one of hundreds of kids that Michael hung out with over the years.
So, do you? I mean, just in your own observations, I mean, if Michael was alive today, I mean, what do you think? I mean, I guess his reaction would probably be what we would expect, but I mean, what do you think he would say to these accusations? I mean, would it? I mean, do you think if he was alive today, would we go through another? Would this be another big sensationalized story like how it was in '03, where he would be tried in a court of law and he might go to jail, or would this just simply just be another case of them trying to just go to civil court?
Well, I think Michael learned his lesson that you don't settle if you're innocent, like he did in '93. So I don't think he would have settled with these people. I think he would have litigated it. I think it would have made him miserable, as it was in 2005. He was a wreck during the trial, apparently, and can't blame him. So emotionally, if this happened while he was alive, it probably would have been quite difficult. Although probably a campaign would have been mounted a lot more effectively to show the other side if Michael was alive.
Do you think that documentary would have even been made if Michael was alive? Or would there have been more, from Dan Reed's perspective, the person who made Leaving Neverland, would there have been a little bit more of a fear of recourse if Michael was alive? I mean, have you heard anything? I mean, yeah. From the Jackson estate, are they even talking about suing Dan Reed for defamation of character? I mean, have you heard anything about that either?
I don't know about that, although I know they are suing HBO for broadcasting it. So frankly, I don't know whether they're litigating against Dan Reed. But I think you're right. If he did that when Michael was alive, he'd be a lot more in danger of defamation or other issues.
Yeah, I mean, with this case, I mean, I guess what are some things, like what are some knowledge that you've come across, basically over the last, 14 or 15 years, what are some nuggets of information that you would say to somebody that is completely 100% sold that, yeah, Save Chuck and Robson are telling the truth and Michael was a pedophile? Like, what would be some nuggets of information that you've come across that you would say, hey, you should consider, X, Y, or Z?
Well, actually, my brother-in-law said to me a couple of weeks ago when I told him I think Michael's innocent still, he said, well, don't you know that Michael slept in bed with kids every night? And don't you know that it's known that he's a pedophile? And I would say to that, no, that's not true. It was shown that the kids occasionally slept in his bed. He's only on the record saying when they did sleep in his bed, he slept on the floor. I'd say also it's kind of a cultural thing where, white men in the United States don't necessarily sleep with other kids in their bed, but there are other cultures where family and friends all sleep in a bed together. When I was with my kids in Indian guides, we'd sleep together in a tent, a bunch of boys all around me, and that wasn't necessarily thought wrong. And, it's kind of like a slumber party in a tent. And so I'd say morally, there's nothing wrong with his behavior. It was unusual. It would be immoral if he molested kids or didn't treat them properly, but that hasn't been proven in a court of law. So I'd say people have their facts wrong if they, one, think that Michael slept in bed with kids every night, and two, that it's wrong for a grown-up to be with kids.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, you bring this point up in your documentary as well, and we'll have a link to that in the description of this video. I mean, you raised the point that, okay, Michael Jackson's room, it wasn't really, I mean, I've heard talks that, it was 2 stories and it was very large. I mean, his room, wasn't it almost, I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't his room almost a non-connected duplex almost? like, wasn't it, like the stairways right into his bedroom? I mean, wasn't that just really fluid, where you would just walk upstairs and you would, quote, be in his bedroom? And it wasn't like how you think of or how we would think of a bedroom where, you walk in and you shut the door and your bedroom only fits, a couple walls in your bed and, maybe a couple of things in a dresser. I mean, yeah, what was his room like? I mean, wasn't it kind of more wallless, more just kind of a large dwelling space?
Well, his bedroom area was kind of like a suite of 3 or 4 rooms, upstairs and downstairs. There was a door to that suite that you had to put in a code to get through there. And there may have been other doors in the estate where you had to put codes in to get through. But his bedroom, the bed itself was in a little room in the second floor, and in the bottom floor was kind of a game room and bathrooms and closets and things like that.
So, and then too, so after the trial, I know Michael, for a while, he lived in Vegas, or he had a residence in Vegas. I mean, obviously, he probably had several residences across the planet. Did he permanently live at Neverland Ranch after the trial? Like, would that be the place that he spent most of his time at least residence-wise? Like, was that...
No, just a brief time after the trial was he living there, but then he moved away and he lived around the world, and then later in Las Vegas and at the end in Beverly Hills. But he had a bad memory of Neverland from the trial, so he didn't live there permanently anymore.
And who owns Neverland Ranch now?
Tom Barrack owns it now. He's a rich guy, head of Colony Capital, I guess a billionaire. He was actually President Trump's inauguration chairperson, so he was in the news some at that time. I don't really know much about him other than he was very nice to one fan. He gave a special tour of Neverland since he's owned it. But that's what I can tell you.
So is it?
By the way, I was there in 2011 or 12, and it was kept up quite well. Most of Michael's furniture was gone, but sorry about my dog, but the grounds were the same, and a lot of the things were the same, and there still was a zoo there. He was kind of keeping up with the animals in the zoo.
Wow. So I mean, to your understanding right now, is that still the case? I mean, is that structure still there? And I mean, are there plans ultimately, is it going to be to tear it down for a golf course or something like that? Is that the ultimate idea? Or are they going to try to keep it actually somewhat resembling what Michael had built it up to be?
Well, my understanding is it's been for sale for a while. So Tom Barrack would like to sell it, I guess. He specializes in buying distressed properties and selling them at a higher price. He apparently uses Neverland some himself as kind of like a guest house. I believe he has other homes in the area. I know a lot of fans would like to have it become a special destination, something Michael Jackson related. I know there's been some talk of having like a music academy there in his day. One of the issues, though, of having too many people out there is there isn't the infrastructure that the county has to accommodate a lot of people. So it can't take that many people on the roads and water and sanitary district and so forth. But that's my understanding of it. And I'm afraid I'm going to need to leave in a bit. I could talk to you again sometime, but I could answer one more question if you want.
Oh, perfect. Then I'll just do one more then. So from Michael Jackson's legacy standpoint, do you think, I mean, again, imagine if you're going to put, you're going to look into a crystal ball, let's say 15 years in the future from now. Do you think, which of these two scenarios do you think is more likely? Either Michael Jackson will almost be expunged from music history where people aren't going to talk about him really, at least in the media. His music won't really play at stadiums anymore, like sporting events. He won't really be played on the radio that much. Do you think that possibility is more likely? Or do you think that, basically people are going to say, no, like Michael's actually innocent and he'll still be revered and still spoken about fondly by the like population in general? Like, which of those two options do you think is more likely? Basically, either he's erased from history, or he kind of maintains where he was, let's say, 5 years ago in the terms of, popular culture and being played on the radio, and maybe like having Captain Neo get brought back again.
My guess is his reputation will go up again. It may not go up to where it was about when he died, but over time, I think the new accusers may become less believable. There may be new information that comes out, and I think his artistry will certainly stand the test of time. So I think I'm hoping anyway that his reputation will be redeemed within a few years. Although knowing how there are a lot of opportunists out there, probably more people will come out of the woodwork and accuse Michael and try to get money out of the Jackson estate. But I'm hoping, and I think quite possibly, his reputation will be redeemed over time.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Well, thank you, Larry, so much for coming on. We'll have a link in the description of this video to your documentary that you made, which it goes very much in depth. I mean, we only touched on some of the points that you raised in that, but I think it's a little over an hour long. I mean, there's a lot of good information there, and I'll definitely have a link to that in the description of this video. So thank you again so much.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that.